Okay, well, hello everyone, and welcome to this little video. In today's lesson, we're going to be painting a beautiful winter cardinal, and we'll use some palette knife and this wash brush by Princeton Velvet Touch, and this little brush here. It's a number 4 flat by the Catalyst Princeton brush. It's like a synthetic brush, and a couple old spotters and maybe this little guy here, which is a Princeton Summit number 2 flat. So kind of basically that's what I'm going to be using. Nothing too complicated. And I have these gesso wood boards, and this is just prepared with some pyrrole red and burnt sienna acrylic. And then I used a little bit of some oil paint to sketch it out and just a little bit of black and some burnt sienna, just something dark to sketch it out. So to start off, I'm gonna just start blocking in. I like to use a darker red and then head to a lighter red. So you can use some alizarin, which I got out here, and I'll just sort of put a little layer of that alizarin down, especially where it's going to be darker on the underbelly there. And then I can go and grab some. I've got out some pyrrole red, which is a real bright, real radiant color of red. And you can always tone it down using some alizarin so you can get sort of a mid-tone. And this here is some cad red light. So you can just see that I'm not too picky about how I apply it. Just mostly I want to get that darker red underneath so that I can really show the lighter highlights and whatnot. So I just really want to get that in there. And I'm just sort of looking at the bird and kind of the overall shape of the head. I like to, just sort of get that initial contrast in there with the black so that you can really see where you're going with the lighter reds and everything. Also, I have this background. It sort of blends with the bird. So what you might want to do is I plan on keeping a real simple background. So I might just go and put a little bit of that around just so there's some contrast. So I can go and I'll get a bit of white and I can get some sap green or some cobalt blue in there and just sort of get something in there to contrast with that red. And also while I'm at it, I've got a little bit of this quick dry medium, which will really help your water mixable oil paint dry a little quicker. So I put a little bit of that in an old egg cup just so I can dip my brush in it and kind of get some of that paint out there. So I just kind of mixed up this greeny blue color just to have something for a little bit of a contrast. And I like having that fun underpaint. It just sort of adds a little bit of a more modern look when I'm painting these birds. I've painted hundreds of them, probably more like thousands, and I kind of just like to do different things and just sort of see, different starts to a painting. You get different effects, when you're working on them. So just get a little more of that cobalt and I also put out this fun color here, which is called ice green, and it's made by Holbein. So if you haven't tried ice green out, I would say give it a whirl. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so I've left lots of little bits of the red here and there, so you can kind of see now the bird better, and you can see sort of, uh, a little bit better direction that the painting's going. Now that you see some contrast between the background and the bird. I just sort of thought of that while I was showing you guys the painting. I thought, uh-oh, it's so, I don't know how in the camera it looks, so I thought I better get something in there to contrast it a little. And so that's a lot better. Now you can see the bird when I'm teaching. And I drew his little feet in there, so I kind of want to show some of that background coming through so you can see the little feet. But you never know. We might have to get rid of some of that when we start adding the greenery. Okay, well that was a quick painting. No, it's still got work to do, but yeah, I'm just gonna now go and start working. I'll go back to the bird now that we have some contrast in there, and I'll work on building the eye area a bit. So I've got some black, and I can add a little bit of that black paint on there. Yeah, it's a little much. And mix some white into that bluey mixture. And I want to get the little eyelid in there. So I'm going to just put a little circle for the eye. It's kind of a squarish circle. They have a kind of a squarish eye. And you'll notice that the ring around the eye is a little large, but don't worry because we're going to put that in, and then we can pull the background and the inside of the eye in, and that'll shape it out a bit. So I'm going to get this bigger brush. It's funnily enough, I find it easier using a bigger brush so I don't get overly detailed. And just going to go and work that little eye in there. and pull some of those feathers into the background a bit. Okay, now I'm gonna go and I've got to work on the beak. So I'm gonna switch. I guess I could use this brush too. I really got to make time to go and order some more art supplies. I get kind of too busy doing the videos and then I forget to restock my tools. But it's important once in a while to get some new painting brushes. So you'll notice I'm paying attention to that little mark where the beak goes in the feathers there. And I'm just using this red and white and a little bit of this vermilion. I've got out some vermilion and pyrrole red, cad red light, and this is cad red deep. And that'll make sort of that coral color for the beak if you add a little white to that. And then I'll wipe my brush off because I need some of that white to go off my brush. And I'll get a little bit of the darker, maybe this mixture here of the darker red. Put a little bit of that in there. And I'm going to go back to my light mixture and put that little highlight in there. And get a little white and something light like that cad yellow deep. The cad yellow deep I got out looks almost orange, but it's cad yellow deep. And then I'll put a little dab of that, little dab up there. There. While I have all that white on my brush, I'm going to put a little bit of some of those highlights in. Okay. Now I'm going to go and start working on the wings. And for the wings, there's sort of a blacky red mixture. So I can just take this mixture here, this alizarin and red, and I'll add a little white to it and some of that black to give me that sort of kind of dulled kind of red color that's in the photo. And just sort of add some of those feathers in there really loosely. And as it comes down the bird, there's some of that kind of orangey, real bright color. And the reason I can add the feathers is I already have quite a bit of that dark. I've made some marks already, but if you haven't, you want to put in some of those darker feather marks first so that you can add these lighter feather marks to the painting. Now I want a color to go kind of underneath the tail. So I'm just going to get a little bit of this red and I mixed a little cobalt in just to kind of dull it down. I'll just put part of that tail in there. And I like to add a little bit of that white and cobalt blue and some white and some of that red and just sort of, I'll put a few of those kind of lighter feathers in there, kind of picking up the light from the underbelly. Okay, make sure you keep when you're painting, make sure to swap out your paper towel once in a while so you keep your paint nice and clean. I haven't really washed my brush too much because I wipe my paper towel off. Okay, just adding a few lighter feathers here and there. And I might even just get some of that vermilion, and I'm just going to really pop that in there. Okay, so now that we got all that, I'm going to just kind of clean my brush here and set it aside. And then I want to go and add some of that green. I'm going to start using my palette knife a little more now, get some of that sap green. And I'm going to put a few of those. We're just keeping this real simple and loose, so I'm just putting a few of those kind of, I guess fir or cedar in there. Rough it up a little, make some abstracty kind of marks. I'm gonna keep going with that, and then I'm gonna get a little more of that white and cobalt mixture. And I'm just gonna add a little more color to this painting, just sort of want to add some more of that paint there and just sort of get that background in there more, a little bit lighter. I'm going to mix up a little more of a lighter mix. Can add a little bit of that ice green to it, tiny bit, just to change it up a bit. Just to really kind of, you can see how it really kind of modernizes it when you do the palette knife work. It just sort of gives it a real loose feeling. And I really like that. So I'm just going to work in some of that into the green for this kind of wintry looking cardinal. I really just make some expressive marks to really get it going. And you can add, I put out some sap for this, but you can definitely use Viridian. You could use, some phthalo blue. And then I'll kind of take a look at the shape here. I'm going to cut in a little bit where that neck got a little bit big. I smudge some of that here and there just to give it a little more of an abstract feel. And you can even get some real pure white and put some nice bright white, kind of almost like snow, but real just like the feeling of it. Then I'm going to get some of that bright red and start using my palette knife to really get some thicker paint on the bird too. You don't want to go all thick everywhere and then have the bird looking totally thin. So I'm going to now switch for a sec. I'm going to go to my brush. You can go to a large brush if you want and just sort of combine some of the palette knife marks a little, especially around the beak. I want to kind of be careful. And so I combined some of those marks and just want to get this area here just a little thinner. Just go back. I kind of scratched a little too much off there, and I don't want to mess up the beak. Okay. And now I'm gonna go and I'll just kind of work on a bit of the details. So I'll go back and get my some black here, and I'll just fluff up some of the areas here that, a little bit here and there of some of those feathers, and clean it off and get some. I fix the beak a bit, and then I'll get a little highlight for his little eye. Get a little bit of this kind of white mixture here and put a little bit of the highlight on his little eyelid that really pops the details. Now I can go back and look at what else I can add. I really like how loose it is. Might go back and just kind of put in a little bit of black where his feet got completely covered by the paint. So it's kind of at this point, I'm just going to leave it, but I could put a little hint of two legs kind of in there. I kind of forgot where they were, but somewhere in here. And just add a little cobalt blue just to show that they're kind of in there somewhere. So some things you just get lost in the translation. That's one of them that got lost in this painting. We lost the legs. So now I'm just gonna go and make sure I want got some highlights on the bird. So I'll get some of this cad yellow deep and maybe this cad yellow light color. Maybe add some vermilion in there, see how that goes. And just sort of put a few some real brightness in there. Add red here. Oh, sorry, that's the Hyrule red. And I'll add a little cobalt and white. And I'm just gonna add a little bit of that blue in the green. Just add in some little hints of green here and there. Okay, well, the only thing I might do is go and add a little alizarin here and there around that little um, neck area just to kind of give it back a little definition. But other than that, that's about it. Don't want to really mess with it anymore and kind of lose that freshness of it. So I think I'll just leave it as is. And I hope you liked this little lesson, and I look forward to, as always, teaching you in the next. So I hope you enjoy and happy painting, everyone.